Hello everyone and welcome to the Crochet Learning Corner and lesson 3 for our beginners course. I'm hoping you can hear me okay tonight. I have my eldest son home cooking dinner and he's got the music up, so hopefully you can still hear me okay. Tonight's lesson is going to be showing you how to work in rows. So I'll wait just a little bit before I get started in case any of you are joining. Now I hope that you've been practicing your chains and the basic stitches we learnt last night. So the chain was from lesson 1 where we showed how to hold the yarn and the hook, create a slip knot and work a chain. And then last night we learnt the basic stitches, which I've got written out here in front of me. So hopefully you've been practicing those. When it comes to working in rows, you can do any of the stitches that you're comfortable with. I will show you in all of them tonight. They all follow the same rules. The only difference is the turning chain, which we'll get to, which I've put in front here. So we're not going to follow a pattern for this. We're just going to practice creating the stitches and seeing where we work into when we work a row. So I'm just going to create a chain to begin with. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've just counted out 10 chains. You can do any chain length that you want. I just don't want to spend all day showing you stitches when we've got the important part is getting from one row to the other. So when you're doing a base chain, the pattern will generally tell you how many you've got to work in. For this, it won't matter. But if I want to do 10 stitches and I'm working in single crochet, then I'll need to add one more to make it 11 so that when I do start making the stitches, I still end up with 10 stitches because you're going to lose one as a turning chain. And that's just for the first one. If I was doing a half double crochet initial chain and I wanted 10 stitches, then I would do 11 or 12, and I'll explain the difference when we get to that. And then if I wanted to do a base chain and I wanted 10 double crochet, then I would do 10 and then I would either add 2 or 3, and I'll explain exactly what I'm meaning for why there's a different number. So for now I'm going to work with the single crochet. So I've done, I don't think I did the extra, so I've got 1, and to count as well you've got either the bumps on the one side or the V's on the other. I prefer to count the bumps. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm going to do one more so I've got my turning chain. Because for this, I'm not going to count that stitch. Okay, so now I'm going to work 10 single crochet into that. And the aim, if you're doing your rows right, then you'll have the same number every time you start a new row. So this is essentially what we learnt yesterday, is working into the chain. My yarn's wearing out a little bit because I keep unraveling it. So just, oops, splitting. Apologies for that. So welcome everyone that's joined. And I do hope that when you are practicing, don't feel that you've got to do every lesson as they come out. Make sure that you're comfortable with what you have learnt so far before you move on to the next one. I don't want you getting frustrated and jumping ahead before you're actually ready. Oh, sorry, my hook and yarn aren't working very well tonight. Okay. Sorry. It's a little bit too split. Okay, so even me with lots of practice still has some issues sometimes, so don't feel that it's all you. Sometimes the quality of the yarn can impact it. This one's had a bit of a workout. Worn out a little bit. Okay. So I'll be showing you how to count these stitches so that we make sure we've got the right number, and then the turning chain and where to work into. If you're not comfortable making the single crochet yet, then by all means go back and practice that. But then working your rows, you're going to be practicing as well. Goodness me. Apologies. things being a little bit rough tonight. Okay, so we'll double check. I should have one more there, so if we look and count, so at the very end here, I'll try and get it as close there as we can. So this little V at the end, that's your turning chain. So I'm not going to count that as a stitch. So we can ignore that first V, and then we've got, you can either count, it's a bit hard with the single crochet to count the posts, so it's best to count the V's for this one. So that first one we're going to ignore. Then we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, sorry, the turning chain's this little bit down here. So we want that first V. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's better. And then we've got the last bump, which is the 10. So the idea of the turning chain is that it gives you height for the next row. And there's a reason that there's all a different number. So now I've got my 10 stitches. If I count the sides, so you can see, you can count through the sides or through the V's. So we're going to do, when you get to the end, before you start the next row, you're going to do a turning chain. So I'm going to do a chain 1, and that gives me some height, and then I'm going to turn. And now I'm ready to start working down the next side. Okay, so when you're working into the stitches, for me, I don't count, for most of my patterns, I don't count that turning chain as a stitch. Some patterns will. And that's why I've got the difference here. So if I was doing a half double crochet, if I'm not counting the stitch, the chain, then I would do a chain 1. If I am counting it, then I would do a chain 2. And with double crochet, if I'm not counting it, I would do a chain 2 to turn. If I am, I would do a chain 3. Now the reason that I do the smaller one and not count it is because if I'm working in a square or a rectangle, it actually gives a straighter edge. And it also gives you something to work in if you're adding a border, but mostly for the straighter edge. Because what you find is if you're using the turning chain to count as a stitch, it's thinner and it ends up going all wonky on the edges. And so I prefer to do a short chain. Now with the single crochet, it's the same no matter what. Okay, so then when you're looking here, I'll try and bring it a bit closer. So you got your turning chain, and now we've got to look for the V's. So the top of the V's, and what we're going to do is when we insert our hook, because so far we've only worked into the chain. So you can see the 2 at the top there. When we insert our hook, we're going to go in to that little gap that you can see. We're going to put the hook in, and if we've done it right, then you will see, it's a bit hard on the edge, but you will see you've got the 2 strands or the V on top. So if I show you, if I only had the 1, then I would be going in the middle there. And so you've only got the 1, or if I'm going in the front, I've only got the 1. Now they are actually a stitch, but not the stitch we want to learn. So if you've come across a front loop or a back loop, then that's what that's referring to. So we're going to work into both. So we're going to insert our hook. So we've got that little gap, and we're going to insert. So we've got the 2 on top, and then we're going to work our stitch. Okay. And then we repeat that all the way across. So you can see, I'm trying to make it so you can see anyway. The single crochet is the hardest one to see. So I'll just do 1 row of that. So you insert your hook. So you've got the 2 on the top. Then yarn over and do your stitch. So I'm assuming here as well that you already know the stitch. So if you're not familiar with them yet, then you'll have to go and watch lesson 2 and get familiar. So in this part, we're just focusing on working into that little gap that you can see. So insert your hook into there and then make your stitch. And then you can see we've got a little bit of a second row. Okay, so I'll finish that row. We want to make sure we still end up with 10, so we don't count that turning chain. And if we get it done right, then we still have 10. So the end one, you can quite often lose the little end one because it tends to fall down a bit. So just be careful with that. And if you start seeing a jaggedy edge, then that will explain why. Okay. So before we do the turning chain, we're just going to double check that we've got all our stitches. So the turning chain on this one kind of gets lost, so we're going to count the V's because it's easier for single crochet. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then that last one kind of hidden under the hook, 10. All right, so this next row, before we turn, we're going to do a turning chain again, and I'm going to do the half double crochet for this next row so it's a bit easier to see. So I'm going to do a chain 1 again. Oop. Actually do it, and then turn my work. So that gives you something to turn, and you can see it's a nice straight edge that we've got. So for the half double crochet, again, we don't want to lose that first stitch, so it kind of gets hidden with the turning chain, but you want that little gap in there as the first one. So we're going to do a half double crochet this time, and we're going to insert. Again, we're going so that we've got the 2 loops. If I separate them, you can kind of see it. Okay, and then we're going to yarn over and we do the stitch same as we would do with the chain. So I don't know if you've worked out where your hands are going yet. Sorry, it's a little bit tricky on the edge. But you want to use, same as when you're working a chain, keep your grip loose. You don't want to strangle your hook. You want your hook to do all of the work. And you're just using your extra fingers and to stabilize the work so that your hook can do what it needs to do, and that'll help you maintain an even tension. So I tend to use my tall man and my thumb to keep everything in place. And then sometimes I'll use this finger on my right hand to sort of hold the stitch if it's moving away. Okay, so if you can see, we've got that little tiny gap in there. It's a bit easier when you're using the taller stitches because you've got a bit more to look for. Okay. And if your tension's too loose and you really can't get it right, then options you've got is if it's too loose, you can go to a smaller hook and that'll get everything closer to the size it should be. If it's too tight, then go for a bigger hook. It's not important for everything, but especially if you're making garments or hats, then it is important. We'll talk gauge another time, but it's important to get the same gauge as the pattern designer so that you get the same outcome that they did. But there's ways to adjust to make that work. Okay, so again, we want to make sure that we've got the 10 stitches. Ooh. Okay, so you kind of see it looks a little different on each side. Plus I'll do a couple of rows of half double crochet so I can show you counting them as well, so it's a bit easier. Okay, so if we count the V's just to make sure, so we've got our little turning chain right on the end that we came from. We're not going to count, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then I've got, hang on, let me double check. We can also count with the posts, so you got 1, 2, it's easier to count the posts on the taller stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that's my turning chain. So I'm going to do one more, and it'll be hiding away down the edge here. That's why, especially when you've got single crochet, I have a feeling I'm counting wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, so we're going to stick single crochet. They hide away on you. Ugh. I've pulled it tight, so that doesn't help either. So if you're struggling, it is normal. See, I'm struggling tonight too. Okay, so we'll do another row of half double crochet. So for that one, the turning chain is 1. Okay, so then we're going to work into that little V there. If we were doing 2, then you would miss that one and you would work into this one. So if you're counting the turning chain as a stitch, which I don't like to do, okay. Now I'm need to pull my yarn. All right, it's a little bit easier to see with the half double crochet because it is a bit taller. So you got the post and then the top of the V. you're just working your way into that. So it's important to have the turning chain because that gives you height for the stitch. Otherwise you'll end up with it kind of sloping a little bit. You won't have a nice even edge. Okay, and as you get comfortable, you kind of just feel where they should be. Okay. Make sure I've still got 10. So you can see the end one does kind of fall down. It's not so hard to see when it's the half double. But you can see if I did finish that row there, that it would be indented a little bit. So we want it to be nice and square. So we're going to, it gets a little tricky. Oop, I want to do both loops as well. Okay. And then I'll do my turning chain and continue back the other way so we get to turn. Let's make sure I've still got 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's magic. Alright, so I'll do another row of half double crochet. So again, make sure you get that first little spot. It can be hard to see. I also recommend when you're first starting not to use yarn that's too dark because it's really hard to see the stitches. This one's kind of a nice contrast to be able to see. Okay, so you can turn this into, if you wanted to make a bigger chain, you can always turn it into a dishcloth that you can use depending how far you want to practice. Oh, that didn't work so well. If you do need to unravel, you just unravel till you get the top of a stitch. Then you can insert your hook back in. It's very easy to fudge things with crochet as well. It's a very forgiving, some patterns aren't so forgiving. You learn the hard way to pay attention, but some can be forgiving. Okay, so the next row that I'm going to do will be in double crochet just so we can see. And then I'll show you some counting. So again, it kind of sneaks away down there. You just pick up the 2 loops. Alright, so now for the double crochet, my turning chain for that one is going to be a chain 2 because I'm not going to count the chain as a stitch. If I was counting it, then I would do 3. And if I was counting it, I would work into this gap instead of this one. But you can see I'm getting a much straighter edge by having the turning chain that you don't count. Okay, so the double crochet just does not want to work tonight. Okay, and we just keep working in across there as we go. Sorry, I need more yarn. Make sure you keep the yarn kind of loose, coming out onto wherever you're working from, just so it's not adjusting your tension too much. And it's okay if it feels foreign because you will get more comfortable as you go. Okay. So nearly at the end. Alright. So again, that last stitch, and you can see the double crochet is going to be even easier to count. The posts are that little bit taller again. So we've got a row of single crochet, then 2 rows of half double, or 3 rows of half double, and then 1 of double. Okay, so I'll just go in that last one. Okay, so then you've got to get familiar with counting your rows as well. So you can kind of see little rows, lines start to emerge. So that kind of distinguishes the rows that you've got. It's a little easier if you're using the same stitch. So you can see these 3 rows here are the same stitch, so you can count them. So we've got a row here of single crochet, then we've got 1, where are we? Did I do 2 rows of that? And 1, 2, 3. So if I do my turning chain, chain 2, I'll do one more row of double crochet before I leave you to go and practice your own rows, because tomorrow we're going to learn some rules around the round. There's a lot more to learn with the rounds than there is a row. Okay, but you can see you may want to, when you first practice, it's probably easier to practice with the double crochet until you can actually recognize the stitches a bit more easily, or treble if you're using UK, if you're familiar with those terms. And this double crochet is the stitch that you will use in a granny stitch. Probably one of the ones that gets used for the most stitches. So if you do want to only focus on one stitch, I'd probably focus on the double crochet, because there's a lot more that you'll learn with that than some of the others. Okay, and then in the end, just make sure we don't forget that end one. Okay, so we've got a nice little square piece here. So you can see this one, the turning chain kind of is a little bit extra on the end, but in the long run it ends up being much straighter. Okay, so we don't count that, so it's a bit easier to see with the double crochet. Let me move them out as well. So we're not counting the turning chain. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you can count the V's instead, and then your different rows. Okay, so we've got a row here. I think I did do 2 singles, because there's a half double, half double, half double, and then two doubles. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense to you. If you go away and practice, decide what stitch count you want to have to start with, and then just keep checking that you've got that stitch count before you move from one row to another. Okay, and have some fun. Show me your rows in the posts, and tomorrow night we'll come back and learn how to work in rounds, which will be a little bit different. There's more rules with rounds, but working, you can see we've got a reasonably straight edge there. Okay, thank you if you join me, and thank you if you watch this later, and we'll be back tomorrow for lesson 4. Okay, good night.